President Biden, he had a short statement on these New Orleans attacks, as well as the one that happened in Las Vegas. His words and appearance did not inspire confidence during the last few days of his White House administration. To discuss all things going on inside the Beltway, we bring in the president and executive editor of the Daily Signal, Robert Bluey. Also with us is White House and Washington reporter for Politico, Daniel Lippman. Great to have you both here. President-elect Trump, he's going to hold a rally on the 19th before his inauguration. It's going to be a victory rally. That's what he's deemed this as. But I want to get to what's happening right now, because there's a lot of fear happening with these two attacks. You could call the one in Las Vegas an attack since there were injuries. President Biden gave a short statement on the terror attacks in New Orleans. Biden said that no one should jump to conclusions after he acknowledges that the FBI has determined that the attacker was inspired by ISIS. That was the one in New Orleans, expressing a desire to kill. Is Biden worried about this anti-Muslim backlash, Daniel? And why are we're getting these mixed messages here from the White House?
Yeah, I think Biden wants to kind of go back to what President Bush said after the 9/11 attacks, not to compare these, but not to, remember Bush went to a mosque and he said, let's not go after our fellow citizens, even if they are Muslim, that we have to be a tolerant country. And so Biden wants to send that message as well. And he also doesn't want to do what Trump did in terms of jumping to conclusions, where I think Trump said this might be an illegal immigrant, where that's not proved to be the case. These two attacks seem to have been both by people affiliated with the U.S. military. So you have to kind of look at radicalization inside the U.S. military and when people leave to make sure that they have a good plan for what to do with their lives. But as Cheney was talking about, this is a dangerous time between administrations. Remember, between the Clinton and the Bush administration, there was critical warnings that were really not listened to during the transition about the 9/11 attacks being prepared. So we want to avoid something like that here.
Yeah, that's a great point. This clip here is from yesterday's presser. Seeing the president stumble through a 4-minute statement, Robert, does that give people confidence in this White House?
No, they don't, John. They don't have confidence in him. I mean, that's why Biden's approval rating is in the 30s, and the American people are ready to move on and probably counting down the days until President Trump can take office. You look at the situation not only there in New Orleans, but Las Vegas, and you have lingering questions about the FBI and its past focus on peaceful protesters at abortion clinics. You have a targeting of J6 protesters. You can go down the list of things that the FBI was doing when they probably should have been focused more closely on radical Islam. And that is, I think, a big responsibility of Pam Bondi and Kash Patel. And it's exactly why the Senate should be scheduling hearings for President Trump's nominees over the course of these next few weeks and make sure that on that week of January 20th, he has a team in place who can hit the ground running and make sure that they're doing everything that they can to keep the American people safe.
But up first is going to be the speakership. We got to get that settled. Daniel, busy week for the Capitol. On Friday, the House will decide the fate of Speaker Mike Johnson. A number of House Republicans have grown frustrated with Speaker Johnson after the most recent spending bill. President-elect Trump has given Johnson complete and total endorsement. He says, I'm behind him in this fight for the speakership. Daniel, does Speaker Johnson have the necessary votes to remain in leadership here?
I think he will be able to. He's spending today making sure that all of his votes are sewn up. I think that even people who are asking questions about his leadership, someone like Chip Roy from Texas, he's not actually against Johnson publicly yet. And so it's only Thomas Massie. And Thomas Massie seems to like to be kind of a stick in the eye for some of these House Republican leaders. And so I don't think that after these two terror attacks that there's a lot of appetite for, hey, let's have 3 weeks of chaos in the House of Representatives. Let's not focus on President Trump's priorities. Maybe that was easier to be done before these New Year's attacks, but after, people would be questioning these people's patriotism.
Yeah, and Robert, isn't this also a test of the Trump influence in the GOP?
It certainly is. I agree with Daniel. I think ultimately Speaker Johnson will prevail. I'm not sure if he'll prevail on the first vote, however. I think there are some Republicans who would like to demand some changes to the rules. There are some who are not necessarily pleased that it'll now take up to 9 Republicans to have a motion to vacate vote in the future on Speaker Johnson. And so we will actually see in the next day or so whether or not Mike Johnson's able to survive. And you're absolutely correct about President Trump. I mean, he has put his backing behind Speaker Johnson because he wants to see this wrapped up and resolved resolved ahead of January 6th, when Congress will meet to certify the election. So he does not want that dragging out. He also doesn't want Congress distracted with this speaker fight when there are so many other important issues that are on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. And in one of his last acts, President Biden, he's giving the Presidential Citizens Medal, the second highest civilian medal, to Liz Cheney and Bennie Thompson. Now, they were the leaders of the congressional investigation into the January 6th Capitol protests. Both members have allegedly destroyed evidence, and Liz Cheney tampered with at least one witness. Cassie Hutchinson, is the Biden administration trying to prop up these two before the Trump White House digs into the committee's alleged wrongdoing? Daniel, I want to go to you on this one.
Well, Biden has been honoring people who were involved in kind of beating back those protests and riots a few years ago. He honored some citizens last year, and I think this is one of the few presidential acts that Trump can't take away from him. So he feels like he should give this honor to Liz Cheney. It is quite ironic because a few years before she became a Trump critic, she was actually supporting Trump on a lot of issues, and so that is the Cheney name is not toxic anymore. Her dad used to be Darth Vader to Democrats, so it's quite the turnaround.
Robert, yeah, I'll give you a final last word on this.
Yeah, well, now the Cheney name will probably be toxic in the Republican Party in perpetuity as a result of this and some of the other things. But the last thing I'd say is, if you look at Liz Cheney and not only the witness tampering that you mentioned, John, but also the fact that the January 6th committee isn't necessarily known for coming up with any new evidence, just regurgitating a lot of things that were already available in the public. It took Republicans in this past Congress to figure out some new information and disclose that to the American people. So I'm not sure why she warrants this award, although I suspect that I'd rather have her get this award than a pardon, because in that case, she might not be able to be held accountable.
And lastly, before we go to break, just want to ask you about this. President-elect Trump, he's going to hold this rally on the 19th in D.C. before inauguration, calling it a victory rally, Daniel. Is this a good idea, given what we've seen? And, you could refer to what's happened in New Orleans, but also what's happened January 6th.
I think there's going to be tight security that he will have. It'll be interesting to see if he can pack that stadium. I'm sure every Trump supporter within 100 miles of D.C. Will be getting multiple emails and text messages to sign up. And so this gives him a chance to talk to his fans before the big day, and he wants to keep that connection going, even if he will be a lame duck the next day.
And Robert, what's your take on this?
It reminds me a lot of the MSG rally before the election, and there in New York City, there will be a lot of Trump supporters already in town for the inauguration. So he probably wants to give them something to do and make sure that they turn out in force and with a lot of energy on Inauguration Day.
Big celebration, a victory rally, as he's calling it. Robert Bluey, Daniel Lippman, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
After